There's nobody and nothing else that really limits us. That you are, let's say, a champion at tennis. I've never played tennis, and I expect that the first time I play, I should beat the champion. It's unrealistic. Be very mindful of the people that you're surrounding yourself with. A successful person, for you to become successful, think about your behaviors. People who are really, really happy and successful, they have certain behaviors. So that is the power of our thoughts. It could literally kill us, or it could actually heal us and help us.
Hey there, amazing listeners. We are back with another exciting episode of Mental Health Matters, and I'm super thrilled to have you join us today. Our guest today is the amazing Dr. Ayesha Suneja, and I'm your friendly host, Pratyush Mohanty. And I'm so happy to be here today with you all and with Dr. Ayesha Suneja to gain a bundle of insights. So, how have you been, ma'am?
I've been really well. Thank you, Pratyush. How about you? How have you been?
Ma'am, I'm doing extremely good and super excited for this conversation.
Likewise, I'm excited as well.
So, today's topic is something that we all must have experienced at some point of time, that is, I limit myself. So, ma'am, we would like to know your thoughts on the concept of this self imposed limitations, while the phrase I limit myself hits different and means different to a different set of people. What does it mean to you?
So, the first thing it means is what you just said, self-imposed. That really I feel that, because there's nobody and nothing else that really limits us. And I'm talking, I understand challenges, limitations, people have different experiences, backgrounds, histories, but truly the biggest limitation comes from ourselves. So I feel that it's a self-imposed, often unconscious belief system that comes from perhaps negative experiences, but it's an assumption of a lack of capability or lack of talent or just a lack of abilities, a very probably misguided lack of capabilities that is self-imposed, subconscious, based off of core beliefs.
Yes, ma'am. Even I believe that these are kind of a frictional force, right? Which tend to push us back. Like they don't let us move forward in the direction we want to move. So even though this thing is in my mind, and I've also heard this particular quote that the only limitations that exist are the ones that we put on ourselves. But I always wonder why we tend to place these limits on ourselves at the first place, right?
Yeah, and for me, what I've found, even for myself and my, whether it's working with people or whether it's looking at my own limiting beliefs, I think it comes from two basic core ideas. One is obviously very clear, it's fear of failure, right? So a lot of times we will limit ourselves because if I can stay safe and not take a risk, then I won't fail. But then it becomes, well, then life becomes can become very meaningless. It can become, we're not achieving what we want. We're not living the life we want, whether that be success in school or career, or whether it be relationships, or whether it be self-improvement, whether it be health, fitness. There's so many aspects. The fear of failure, it says, stay here, stay safe, stay small. And the other, I think, big core issue is fear of success. So where there's one where I'm afraid that I'm going to fail, and failure feels like embarrassment, humiliation, shame. It could feel like you could feel angry, you could feel so disappointed, you're letting other people down, all of that. The other idea is fear of success. And fear of success, people would say, well, why would we be afraid of success? Well, when you're successful, you actually have to show up. You have to be in the limelight. People will see you and hear you, and then you have to be responsible. You have to keep it going. There's a fear of that I might change, I might become a different person, people may not like me, my friends might leave me. It was all these core beliefs about what success looks like. And so I would say those two are the big ones: fear of failure and fear of success.
Definitely, ma'am. Like I have also this ideology that until and unless we put ourselves on the same shoes, for example, I want to put myself on the shoes of success. So until and unless I hit the stone of failure, how can I reach there, right? So if I limit myself at this particular point, I might not even reach that particular stage. Like you said, stay safe, stay small. I don't want to stay small. So I have to go up, and I should not limit myself. But here, um, that's where people probably stuck, I guess. Like, uh, when we think about breaking these limits, it's like easier said than it's done, right?
Yeah, absolutely. So what you just said I thought was so amazing, because if I make a mistake and if I do something, right? So there's a difference between, let's say we fail at something, there's a difference between shame, humiliation, embarrassment. Shame, we know, is a very internal experience. We hide with shame. So we do something, we fail at it, we feel shame, we'll just go and hide and say, I don't ever want to be seen again. Humiliation feels like someone humiliated me. So the idea is I did not deserve it, but I was treated in a way that was humiliating. And that can really break a lot of people. So what'll happen is they'll try something, right? And their expectation that they will fail or make a mistake is very unrealistic. So they'll go into something and say, the standards, the expectations they have are so high that when they fail, the embarrassment, the humiliation, the shame is so overwhelming that they'll never try it again. They'll say, well, I'm not good at that. Oh, I'm not good at that. But that's like, you saying to me, that you are, let's say, a champion at tennis. I've never played tennis, and I expect that the first time I play, I should beat the champion. It's unrealistic. So when we bring, I'm not saying to lower our standards, but to lower our unrealistic expectations and say, I'm going to fail. I am going to have to try again and again and again to get better and better and better at this. And then I can say, yes, this is something I've tried really hard. I've really put a lot of effort. And part of that journey is going to be making mistakes and failing. And like you said so beautifully, it's there that we learn. We don't learn when we are actually succeeding. We learn when we make mistakes. We don't grow when someone gives us compliments. We actually grow when we get a little bit of criticism, especially if it's positive criticism or critiquing. That's where we grow. So the thing that we're avoiding is the thing that's going to make us better. Mistakes, failures, criticism, all of that are just stepping stones to getting where we want to go.
Absolutely, ma'am. They are the stepping stones, and if we like avoid those stepping stones, like it's a plain path, right? And we are not gonna go high, we are gonna go straight, not high. So that's the thing. So ma'am, why not we talk about some practical steps about some like what we can do at our individual levels when we say ourselves that I limit myself, but I don't want to limit myself. So what would be the steps?
Yeah. So I think the very first step is acknowledging that I limit myself. And I don't think a lot of people really pay attention to that. They will just go back into their fear and they don't realize why they're doing it. So, for example, let's say that I want to learn something new. And so I start reading more about positivity, right? Usually what I do is I meet my friends, we all complain, we gossip, we talk about negative things, we put people down, we criticize people, and we, do all of these behaviors, and then we come home and I don't feel really good about myself, but that's my habit. That's what I do. And one day I decide, for me to actually be better at whatever it is, whatever goal I'm trying to achieve, I need to stop engaging in those behaviors, right? Because what am I consuming? I'm consuming negative thoughts. I'm consuming a lot of comparison. Comparison is something that'll really kill our ability to grow and thrive. So I'll say to myself, maybe I'll start consuming something better. I start reading books on positivity. I start listening to a podcast or, a talk on positivity, for example. I start exercising, because I start feeling better after I exercise. I start eating healthier. So I'm doing all these things. And then the next week when I go to meet with my friends, I tell them, you know what, I'm doing this. And let's say my friends laugh at me and they say, what is this positive, bakwas that you're doing? Look at this. And they start gossiping and criticizing, and they go, well, what I might do, we call this self-sabotage. What I might do is say, oh yeah, you know what? I don't need to exercise. I go back to eating the unhealthy food. I stop watching the positive channels. I put down the positive books, and I go back to what my friends are doing, because that's safe, because that's comfortable, because nobody is going to make fun of me or tease me or confront me, because nobody wants to make those changes, right? I did, but self-sabotage says when we give up on ourselves and we start conforming with others, especially when we have an idea that is really, really like amazing, we might feel a little high. And then if we don't get that positivity come back to us, we might just leave it and then go back to our normal self. So the first thing I would say is be very mindful of the people that you're surrounding yourself with. Be mindful of what you are eating, what you are reading, what you are watching, what you are listening to, because all of whatever you're consuming is going to make a huge impact on how you show up in the world. So that would be the very first step. And then after that is going to be then confronting your fears and saying, okay, what am I really afraid of? I'm afraid of, again, there's a long list of people's fears. I'm afraid that if I become successful, I will change. Some people think, oh, I'll become egotistical, I'll become narcissistic if I become successful, so I'll just stay small, because that is the sure way for me to be a good person. But I have seen people that are very successful, extremely successful, both financially and, like relationally, emotionally, very successful. And yet they are some of the biggest humanitarians in the world. Their success allows them to fund projects, to help others, to serve others, to give back to communities. So they can be very successful and also be humanitarians, or just really giving back to society. So let's bust that fear that good people, spiritual people are not successful, because that's not true. And then I would start thinking about like, well, how do I then, every time the self-sabotaging behavior shows up in my life, how do I start paying attention to that behavior? Because it's not just our thoughts, it's not just our feelings, it's our behavior. What am I doing? Because successful people that are doing really well, and I use that word success, is different for everyone. For some people, success could be being a really, really good mother and wife. That could be the most successful person because she's present and available for her family. And for some people, success could be reaching the heights of success in a corporation or a business. Success looks different to everybody. But my experience of success is, it's not just at work or at school, it's also in your relationships. Because if you're successful, but your relationships are falling apart, then that's going to affect your mental health. It's going to affect your happiness. So I would say, for a very successful person, for you to become successful, think about your behaviors. People who are really, really happy and successful, they have certain behaviors. They There's a time they wake up. There's a time they go to bed. There's a time of what they consume, what they eat, the people that they interact with. They are usually kind. They're usually compassionate, thoughtful. They're kind to other people and to themselves. They usually don't criticize or gossip about others. So it's these behaviors that sometimes we say, oh, this is too much for me to do. It's too much for me to change. I can stay my own way. I can stay up till 4 a.m. I can eat all the junk food. I can talk negatively about others. And that feels more safe to me or feels more comfortable to me. But then the dreams that they dream never really happen because they never change their behaviors to match that of successful people.
Absolutely, ma'am. Should I conclude our disciplined life is directly relational or directly proportional to success and being a better human in general?
Yes, absolutely. And discipline is hard work, right? Anything that you want to build, whether it be a business or whether it's your body, anything that you want to build and grow and make successful, it requires discipline. So I think what you said was 100% right on.
Yes, ma'am. So now let's shift our gears a bit. And just like in your experience, have you seen any common patterns or themes when it comes to specific areas where people tend to say themselves, I limit myself, or like they place any self-imposed limitations on themselves?
Yes, absolutely. I think the patterns that I've seen are usually of adverse situations. I've seen both. One could be a difficult childhood, any kind of adverse childhood experiences, because the core beliefs. So remember, our thoughts come from core beliefs. So let's say, I'll give you a really quick example. If I said to you, let's go, to an event. Let's go to the social event. There will be lots of people you don't know there. It might be a great networking opportunity. And if your automatic thought is, no, I'm not going to go there. I don't want to do that. It's an automatic thought. It comes from an assumption. The assumption is everyone's going to have fun but me. Everyone's going to be doing, everyone knows everybody. I don't know anybody. It's not going to be fun for me. I'm going to be alone. That's the assumption. So underneath the assumption is a core belief. And there's only a handful of core beliefs that are universal. I'm not good enough. Something's wrong with me. I'm not lovable. I'm defective, right? These are universal core beliefs. So if we actually start looking at these core beliefs, where do they come from? It could come from a very critical parent. It could come from a very critical teacher or mentor. It could come from, so at a very young age, this core belief went deep inside and we started to believe something is wrong with me. Everybody else is doing okay, but something is wrong with me. But here's the way that we can really destroy that myth. Everyone thinks this way. Pretty much everyone I've spoken to, when we get down to the core beliefs, they all think, but you don't understand, something's wrong with me. Because we don't share it, we don't tell people, we have to put on this mask and show up and say to everybody, I'm okay, I'm confident, I'm capable. But deep inside that core belief, something is wrong with me. So let's go back to evolution. Let's go back to when people lived in caves, right? If you weren't strong or capable or competent, if you weren't contributing in some way, you would be left behind. The tribe might move to a different location. If you weren't strong and capable or contributing, then they might leave you and you might die. I mean, that was a high chance back then that could happen to you. It doesn't happen anymore. For the most part, our families and our loved ones, nobody's leaving us. But the core belief that is inside most people is still, I'm not good enough. Something's wrong with me. And so when we start recognizing that core belief and busting that myth and saying, how could that belief be universal? How could everybody be feeling it if it was true? And so we start rising above that and saying, that is the part of my limbic system. It's a part of my brain that is just surviving. It's like we call it the reptilian brain. It's our oldest part of our brain. And it's just surviving. It's trying to keep us safe and saying, stay small, stay hidden, survive. But then we have a much higher concept of our brain, like the prefrontal cortex, which is creativity, problem solving, kindness, compassion, generosity. It has such beautiful ways of understanding life and people, but it's blocked when we are in the limbic system, when we are afraid, when we are angry, right? These high intensity emotions. So what do? Well, whenever we're in the limbic system, whenever we're in the amygdala, that reptilian part of our brain, which is full of fear, we start to take a moment to notice it. Say it out loud, right? I'm stuck in my reptilian brain. I'm stuck in the limbic system. I'm stuck in my amygdala. I'm afraid. I'm angry. What can I do? Well, I can breathe. I can breathe really deeply from my belly, because just a few deep breaths can get us out of that amygdala and get us back into the prefrontal cortex. We all have access to it. And once we get to that part of the brain, we can start problem solving. We can find solutions. We can start having hope. And hope is the answer to almost all of these problems. It is not that I need a solution. It is just that I need to come into a part of me that is a lot higher than what I have thought of myself. So I would just start by recognizing, where am I? How do I get out of that part of my brain, get into the part of the brain that's higher functioning? From there, all possibilities are available to me.
Absolutely true, ma'am. We have to just tell ourselves, eliminate those automatic thoughts, na? Why to think something which everybody thinks? Like, everybody in a particular room is thinking that I am not that good enough, but you are also a part of it. Why to be a part of it? You are unique. You have something which nobody else have. So we have to just turn around that ideology, bring out what is unique in ourselves, and just keep that particular thought in our mind every time we encounter these automatic thoughts. And there we that's what we need to come out of that particular, what do I see, we are in a closed room. Just to come out of that closed room, I have to keep that ideology in my mind, and I am out of that room. Now I am with everybody. I'm networking with people. I have a lot of friends. Everybody is liking me. Like, that's where things change, right? So, ma'am, this last one question before we wrap up. Considering the complexity of this journey of decreasing or reducing the self-imposed limitations on the path of self-discovery, how does seeking help from somebody or from some sources contribute in breaking free from this particular phrase, I limit myself?
Great question. So we all have two parts of our mind, right? One is that we just talked about, that automatic thoughts, reptilian brain that just goes automatically to the worst case scenario because it is survival based. But we also have this logical part of our brain, the rational part that says, you've heard it, I've heard it. We will say something really like, oh my God, I'm never going to get over this problem. This is terrible. And then there'll be this part of our mind that will say, well, you know what? You might be okay. Logically, rationally, actually, you know what? It's not going to be that bad. You've done this before. You've seen other people do. So the rational part kicks in. So what happens when that rational part is not kicking in? We need that rational part from somebody else. We need it from a friend or a family member or a mentor, a teacher, somebody who will say to us, well, you know, I realize that you've had this really bad failure, or you realize that you've gotten yourself in trouble, or you realize, but chances are after a few days, this thing might change and you might be able to get out of it, or we can find a solution. Chances are you're not the only person that's ever done this. Therefore, there's got to be somebody else who's experienced it, and we can research and we can find out how to. So a rational person shows up and gives us an opportunity to kind of crawl out of this very self-defeating, sometimes even victimizing role that we're in. And we need that person to remind us that we have that built into ourselves. And eventually, once we get enough of that support from that other person, that other rational, logical part of our brain will start to encounter more and more opportunities to give that to ourselves. I wanted to say something about, you said something about like, you go into this room and then, you can change your thoughts or challenge your thoughts. I think that was it. You can challenge your automatic negative thoughts. And you gave us beautiful examples of some good ones that you could create. And I wanted to share the story that I just heard this morning. And it was of a man, you may have heard of it, but there was a man who worked, I think it was like in a factory, and there was like a freezer involved. And he went into the freezer and the freezer locked automatically, so he couldn't open the door. And so this freezer is this big, huge freezer, all his frozen food is inside of it. And he started to feel really, really cold. And he started to realize that he was going to die because, there was nobody else there. People were not going to come for hours. And he had a notebook with him. And he took out the notebook and he sat in the corner and he started to write he said, those are going to be my last words. And he wrote down, I am freezing. I am losing my breath. I am going to slowly die. I'm never going to see my wife or my kids again. And he continued to write and write and write. And after a few hours, the people came into the factory, they opened the freezer and they found his dead body. Now here's the sad part. The freezer was broken. The freezer was not freezing. It was 57 degrees. True story. He had convinced himself with his own thoughts and his own feelings that created physiological responses in his body that shut his body down, and he died, not because of the temperature, but because of his own thoughts. So that is the power of our thoughts. It could literally kill us, or it could actually heal us and help us, and it could make us healthy again. So when I heard that story, I thought, this can't be true. But then, researching, it's a true story. It actually works. So until we can create that positive, rational, logical part of our brain to be just coming on really quickly, we can use friends and family and loved ones to give us some hope to come back to reality.
Yes, ma'am. I was also wondering, if that person would have challenged his own thoughts, of his defeating thoughts. If he would have challenged it, probably he would have stayed alive. Not probably, he would have surely stayed alive. But that's what you said, right? We have a lot of power in our own thoughts. We have to craft them in a constructive way instead of in a destructive way that leads to our own destruction. So, right. So, ma'am. So with this, we come to the end of this episode. So thank you, ma'am, for sharing your expertise and the wonderful insights with us today. I had a lot of takeaways from this conversation. We have to sometimes lower our unrealistic expectations and eliminate the self-sabotage behavior. So, ma'am, do you have any closing remarks for our listeners?
Yeah, I think, what you're talking about, I think, is so powerful. And I love the topics and the passion that you have for these topics. So I was just wondering if we could all hold each other accountable, even for a day. I would love to say for a week, but even for a day, if we can just all start committing to this idea of I'm going to just notice my thoughts. I'm going to notice how many positive thoughts I have, how many negative thoughts I have in a day. And just by noticing, I'm going to just for this one day start taking accountability and saying, I have the power to shift from these negative thoughts to more positive ones. I'm going to start noticing when I'm limiting myself or getting in my own way or doing any kind of self-sabotaging behavior. It all starts with awareness. So if we could all just kind of hold each other accountable for the next 24 hours, if we can just start noticing, that might actually start shifting something.
Absolutely, ma'am. Even I'm going to try this, and I guess each and every person from our audience is going to implement this. And so, thank you all for tuning into this episode of Mental Health Matters with Dr. Ayesha Suneja. Remember, you are capable of achieving anything you set your mind to. So, don't let the self imposed limitations hold your back, and let's continue to break down these walls of self limitations or any mental limitations one episode at a time. As we wrap up this conversation, I want to remind you that this isn't just a podcast but a shared exploration with the goal of breaking down barriers. So, until then, keep shining and pushing forward. This is your host, Pratyush Mohanty, signing off.